Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. In the previous episode, Toan suffered from severe headaches, and Tu Diem, together with Thu, took him to the hospital for examination. After that, Toan was discharged and returned home under Tu Diem's devoted care. Today, we continue exploring the story of Toan and Tu Diem, as Toan's memory has fully returned and long-buried truths begin to surface. Will their life finally find peace, or are more challenges waiting ahead? If you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. The morning after Toan returned from the hospital, the small farmhouse remained wrapped in Tu Diem's quiet care. The doctor's prescription lay neatly on the table. She remembered every instruction clearly. When to take the medicine, how much rest was needed, what he must absolutely avoid. Since bringing Toan home, she had barely left his side. Warm water was always ready. The medicine was taken on time. When he slept, she sat nearby, watching his breathing closely, afraid she might miss any sign of trouble. That morning, Tu Diem woke early. She stepped outside into the small yard and sat beside the familiar wood stove. The fire had just been lit, glowing red beneath the pot. She carefully added pieces of wood, boiling water for tea and preparing breakfast. The soft crackling of firewood mixed with the sound of early birds, making the space unusually calm. Everything looked normal, yet the tension of the past few days still weighed heavily inside her. As she bent down to adjust the fire, she heard soft footsteps coming from inside the house. Tu Diem looked up. Toan was walking out into the yard. His steps were steadier than they had been in days. No hesitation, no wavering. He walked over and sat down on the old wooden bench beside the stove, right next to her. Neither of them spoke. Toan simply stared at the flames, as if lost in thought. Tu Diem froze. The stick in her hand stopped mid-air. Her heart began to race. Something about Toan was different. His eyes no longer drifted aimlessly. There was no trace of confusion, no sign of someone searching for missing pieces. He sat close, yet felt like a man who had traveled far and returned carrying everything he had once lost. She didn't dare ask. She only watched. A quiet certainty slowly formed inside her. The man sitting beside her was no longer the Toan of those days of amnesia. Toan turned and looked at her. Their eyes met, hers filled with doubt and fragile hope, his calm and grounded. A faint smile appeared on his lips, not wide, not dramatic, just deep and steady, the smile of someone who had finally found himself again. His voice was low and warm as it broke through the crackling of the fire. He said he remembered everything now. Tu Diem couldn't speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at him. Toan turned fully toward her. His gaze grew distant, as if he were looking back into a long, dark nightmare. His voice slowed, each word drawn carefully from memory. That day, he said, he had felt uneasy about her. He returned to the farm. There, he met his mother and two unfamiliar men. Coldly, she told him that she had driven Tu Diem away, that everything had been sold, the company, the vehicles, the farm itself. She said the family would leave the country and start over. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He called Tu Diem again and again, but the calls never went through. Then, without warning, a blow came from behind. Darkness fell instantly. Everything disappeared from that moment on. Toan's voice tightened as he continued. When his memory returned, the most painful truth came with it. His mother had admitted that he was not her biological child. He was an abandoned child she had taken in. The words cut deeply. At first, he refused to accept them. Then came silence, and finally, understanding. All those years of opposition, all the resistance, none of it came from concern. It was because he had never truly belonged. Tu Diem sat motionless, her hands clenched tightly together, her eyes reddened. But she didn't cry out. She feared that if she lost control, he might fall back into that emptiness again. The space around them seemed to grow still. Only the wind slipping through the door and the faint smell of smoke remained. Toan looked at her. The confusion in his eyes was gone. What remained was certainty. He said that no matter how many years his mother had raised him, no matter how painful the truth was, he chose to let it go. He didn't need that past anymore. The only thing he needed was the woman who had searched for him everywhere, who had refused to believe he could ever abandon her. Tu Diem trembled. For a brief moment, fear crossed her mind. Fear of that woman, fear of the two men. She suggested reporting everything to the police to protect him, but Toan reached for her hand. His grip was gentle, yet firm. He told her he would handle it himself. He promised that no one would ever hurt her again. The words were quiet, but strong enough to make her believe. He thanked her for staying, for believing, for being his only anchor when the world turned its back on him. Tears rolled down Tu Diem's face, but she smiled as she told him she would never leave either. In that small farmhouse surrounded by open fields, the two sat close together, silent but stronger than ever. By midday, Toan remembered the white Airblade motorcycle he had left near the dirt path leading into the farm, along with his jacket and helmet. The girl there had turned everything over to the police. He said that today he would finish building the stove and the brick borders. Tomorrow he would retrieve the bike and ask the authorities to investigate the two men. Tu Diem nodded. She trusted him completely. She prepared to go harvest on her own. Toan stayed behind with bricks and mortar. Before leaving, she turned back to look at him. He smiled and reminded her to be careful. As her figure disappeared down the dirt road, Toan picked up the trowel. Each layer of mortar he spread felt like laying the foundation for a new life. The sun climbed higher over the green fields behind the house. When Tu Diem left the yard, walking down the familiar dirt road away from the farm, Toan remained behind. In his hands were the trowel, bricks, and mortar he had prepared. No one urged the other. No extra words were needed. Each of them knew what had to be done. Toan began finishing the stove and the brick borders around the yard. He worked slowly but steadily. Each brick was placed carefully, aligned and secured before the mortar was spread. His hands were still a bit weak after the recent days of exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. He wasn't working to show off, nor to rush. He worked as if he were rebuilding his own life, starting from the smallest things. The memories that had returned were still there. Some of them caused a dull ache in his chest, but unlike before, they no longer overwhelmed him. He let them pass without holding on, without pushing them away. He focused on each brick, each line of mortar, keeping his mind anchored in the present. Out in the fields, Tu Diem walked between the dense rows of pumpkin vines. The pumpkins were large and firm, resting close to the ground. She stopped at the plot of an elderly woman she knew well. They greeted each other briefly. The woman sold each pumpkin for 5,000 jong. There was no bargaining. Tu Diem chose them carefully, lifting each one gently and placing it into her basket. Her heart felt lighter, as if these familiar tasks helped her regain a sense of normal life after so much turmoil. When the basket was full, she carried it to the market. The sounds of buying and selling filled the air. She spread out a small mat, arranged the pumpkins neatly, and began calling out. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Customers stopped by. Some asked about the price, some inspected the produce. She answered each one, weighed the pumpkins, took the money and returned the change carefully. Some praised the tenderness, others said the soup would be sweet. She smiled, thanked them, and continued. After selling almost everything, Tu Diem stopped at a small roadside stall. She selected some fresh fruit and a packet of cakes. These were gifts for the elderly woman who had once saved Toan. Lifting the bag, she felt a quiet relief, not because of how much she earned, but because she knew she was moving forward, even if the road ahead wasn't easy. On the way home, she slowed her pace. The wind from the fields carried the scent of soil and leaves. In her mind, she saw Toan at home, bent over his work, building the stove. That image steadied her steps. She wasn't only bringing back the day's earnings, but also a quiet belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. When Tu Diem appeared at the end of the dirt path, the yard looked different. The new stove was finished. The brick borders around the yard were straight and tidy. Toan stood there, his hands still marked with mortar. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. She walked over quickly, unable to hide her surprise. She praised his work. Toan gave a small laugh and said it was just a simple layer, enough to make it sturdy. She told him about the market, the customers, and how the elderly woman was doing. Toan listened while washing his hands, paying attention to every word. No one interrupted the other. Then he praised her for her effort. She praised his skill. Simple words, but they warmed the small yard. Toan suggested visiting the elderly woman together. Tu Diem agreed. They changed clothes and prepared the gifts. Before leaving, they stopped at a roadside stall to buy a bit more fruit and cakes. Tu Diem wrapped them carefully. Toan carried the bag for her. They walked side by side at an unhurried pace. Toan held her hand and said, "Walking like this made his heart feel lighter." She said the woman would be happy to hear that his memory had fully returned. Along the way, Tu Diem spoke about the days she spent searching for him, the fear that she might never see him again. Toan listened quietly. He squeezed her hand, saying little. When the thatched house came into view, their steps quickened. The elderly woman was sitting beside a small oil lamp. When she saw them, she looked up in surprise. Recognizing Toan, her face lit up. Tu Diem set the gift down and told her that Toan had regained all his memories. The woman clasped his hand, tears forming as she asked about his health. Toan bowed his head in thanks, saying that without her help, he might not be there at all. The woman waved it away, saying helping someone in need was only natural. They sat and talked about Tet, about hometowns, about the days ahead. She praised Tu Diem for her strength. Tu Diem smiled and said she had simply followed her heart. The small room grew warm, even as night settled outside. When they left, the woman walked them to the door and reminded them to be careful on the way home. Toan held Tu Diem's hand as they stepped into the night. The road was darker, but neither felt afraid. Above them, a few stars appeared. The past still carried pain, but the present was enough for them to keep walking together.